Good evening, dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, our guest will be Yurter Özcan, the Republican People's Party representative to the United States. We will be talking about CHP's recent demands for transparency and accountability, as well as the future of Turkey-US relations under the Biden administration. But first, let's take a look at this week's developments. The total number of COVID-19 cases in the country stands at 1.74 million, according to the Health Ministry's figures released on December 10th. The ministry also reported 30,424 more coronavirus infections, including 5,918 symptomatic patients for the past 24 hours. The total number of symptomatic cases, which the ministry refers to as patients, reached 564,435 with the latest additions. During his speech to Parliament on Monday, the chair of the main opposition Republican People's Party, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, promised to nationalize pro-government companies as investments when the party comes to power.
Kılıçdaroğlu said he would expropriate all investments made by the Gang of Five once the CHP rules the country. The Gang of Five refers to the five major construction companies that keeps receiving the lion's share of public funds despite widespread criticisms. These five companies, Limak, Kolin, Cengiz, Mapa and Kalyon, are known for winning the highest number of public tenders globally. We will nationalize and seize all the investments of this Gang of Five that will exploit even our grandchildren, Kılıçdaroğlu said, as he also vowed to end this order of thefts. Turkey's private-public partnership system has been used to fund mega projects that includes bridges, ports, roads and airports. The system turned into a way of giving out handouts to the companies close to the Justice and Development Party. It allows private companies granted tender on the projects to make an initial investment and construct the infrastructure, after which they are granted the license to operate it for periods often reaching decades. The guaranteed income the government often grants these companies during their tender period is also a subject of debate. Agreements may stipulate that, in the event that a tender operating company's revenues from the infrastructure projects do not reach a certain level, the government will pay the difference. The income is often guaranteed in dollars, which exaggerates public losses even further since the Turkish lira has been losing value heavily against international currencies for the past years. Kılıçdaroğlu criticized the said guarantee, saying the tenders are not local and national as the government claims to be. You pay this Gang of Five not only dollars, but also the difference in the exchange rate as the lira keeps weakening. What did you give the shop owners? You gave them loans and then pressured them to pay it back, he said.
The decisive fight of opposition figures against nepotism, crony capitalism, and overt corruption cases has continued on various fronts this week. Ankara Metropolitan Mayor Mansur Yavaş has launched corruption investigations into the previous Justice and Development Party administrations run by former Mayor Melih Gökçek. Yavaş revealed that public loss had amounted to 3 quadrillion liras for 40 corruption cases.
In a press statement broadcast on the municipality's social media accounts, Yavaş said that they have submitted 40 files to the public prosecutor's office concerning major corruption and mismanagement undertaken during the years of Gökçek. Public loss is equal to 2.8 quadrillion liras for just 6 of the corruption files, and for approximately 40 criminal complaints, the public loss has been determined to be 3 quadrillion liras, Yavaş said. During Gökçek's rule in the city, which lasted for almost a quarter of a century, unnecessary and costly projects were undertaken, such as statues of robots and dinosaurs. One of such projects was the installation of an inflatable gorilla called Şişme Dinocan. Yavaş shared a picture of this project during the press meeting, saying, "The name of this work is called Şişme Dinocan. What has this got to do with Ankara's people, history and culture?" Yavaş was awarded the 2020 Special Award by Transparency International's Turkey branch. Since his election in March 2019, Yavaş has promoted transparency in municipal governance and finances, including the live broadcasting of tenders. This year's other award recipients are Medyascope contributor and Gazete Duvar columnist Bahadır Özgür, as well as the Turkish Medical Association. Turkey ranks 91 out of 198 countries in the latest corruption index from Transparency International.
Chair of the main opposition Republican People's Party, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, spoke to Medyascope's editor-in-chief Rushan Çakır this week in a special broadcast. Kılıçdaroğlu answered Çakır's questions regarding the state of law in Turkey and the unlawful imprisonments of former People's Democratic Party co-chair Selahattin Demirtaş and philanthropist and businessman Osman Kavala, the problems in the economy and possible solutions, his candidature for presidency, the nation's alliance, the People's Alliance, and the management of the pandemic. Here are some excerpts from the interview.
There's a major decay in the courts. There's a major decay in the Ministry of Justice. No one believes justice is served in Turkey. Even the president of the Court of Cassation has stated that trust in justice in Turkey is at 30%. Judges are called into private households so that certain individuals can go over judicial decisions before they are declared. Which judge is independent? Those who relay their decisions in accordance with the rule of law are punished. Those who follow the directives of the palace are rewarded. The judiciary in Turkey has become an institution that fulfills the instructions of Erdogan. And if the judiciary is not independent in a country, then no one has safety of life or property. I appeal to the conscience of AKP MPs. I wanted to address their sense of justice. If the MPs of the government party have been elected by the people, then they are responsible to find solutions to the problems of the people. They are responsible to fight for these solutions. Problems nowadays are deepening. I am forced to appeal to their conscience because they are aware of the problems and are nonetheless remaining silent. They have been in power for 18 years and they repeatedly promised to solve the economic troubles of this country. They promised to solve poverty, yet they were the only people who got rich. They exploited all the resources of the state with their partners. The people got poorer, and no solution has been provided. I want AKP MPs to wake up. I'm sure many of them are deranged by this situation. I told them that there were many among them who were very valuable and very knowledgeable. They should be appointed as ambassadors, for example, not those who accepted bribes. This is a disgrace in this republic's history. Our representative is a man whose acceptance of a bribe has been made public. Are there no honorable people left to represent this country? What type of presidential candidate do the people want? Should there be a single man rule, where one person makes all the decisions? Should the president be able to interfere in the rule of law? Should the president be impartial or partisan? Should the president be an example to the people, or should the president be completely detached from the reality of the people and living in a palace? The president should be impartial, should be an example to the people, should not act based on hatred and anger, should embrace all citizens, regardless of their identities, lifestyles, or beliefs. But there are no such discussions in a single man rule. We are an alliance who want democracy. We do not turn the issue of presidency into a personal matter. We have to decide first and foremost what should be the limits on the authority of the president. We want the president to be the guarantor of the state, to solve disputes among political parties, to look out for the interests of the country. This alliance appeared as a result of solidarity culture. When we near elections once again, we will come together in order to discuss. There are new parties that have been established since. The next elections are not an election for parties to compete with one another. The next elections will be a race between those who want democracy and those who want an authoritarian, one-man rule regime. We have to look at the elections as such. This is, in essence, the issue. We want to be together with everyone who is on the side of democracy. The only way this is possible is through a strengthened parliamentary system. Whichever party wants this solution will no doubt come together to speak about it and collaborate. There are different parties in this country with many differences. Yet what brings us together is our common vision on the essential points such as democracy, human rights, the independence of the judiciary, freedom of the press and freedom of expression, peace in the world. These will be defined in the Constitution. Mistakes were made from the outset. There was a scientific committee, and they should have been the ones making the statements to the public. The Minister of Health began all his statements with the following words: in accordance with our president's directives. This sentence indicates that you are not telling the truth to the public. Why? Well, the place where you need to get your information regarding the health crisis is the scientific committee. He does not start his sentences by saying, in accordance with the advice provided by the scientific committee. What is Erdogan's experience in public health? What education has he received in this regard? Any minister who begins his or her statements as such are not real ministers, but the employees of Erdogan. They relay his directives and his directives only. If we want to keep our respectability in the world, the government must provide the correct information to the public and not lie to them.
This evening, our guest is Yurter Özcan, the Republican People's Party representative to the United States. Good evening, Mr. Özcan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for your invite, Shirin Hanım.
So, CHP Chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu's budget talk this week in the parliament has led to reactions on social media, with thousands sharing bits and pieces of the hour-long talk. Many have even compared this excitement surrounding the talk to the Justice March of 2017 in terms of a renewed sense of hope for accountability. This, combined with Ankara Mayor Mansur Yavaş's investigation into the previous AKP Mayor Melih Gökçek's corruption and misuse of public funds, seems to suggest that there's a renewed energy within the CHP to fight and bring to light the problems the AKP administration has led to, namely its corruption as the source of the country's economic woes. The work of other MPs throughout the pandemic to hold the government accountable shows that there's a desire for transparency, more so than ever, taking on a more active role in defining the agenda, as opposed to responding to the agenda as defined by the ruling party. So how do you evaluate these recent actions demanding transparency and of wanting to hold the government accountable for its corruption?
Yes, I think that's a very important question. Just to start, just to give you a very good example from our party. In our party, there's actually a written requirement that anybody who runs for a seat for CHP, that they will be very transparent in terms of their business dealings and be very transparent about how they went about making a living. So I think it actually reflects what we want, not only in our party, but across the country overall. I think it's actually now in Turkey an established fact beyond partisan lines that there's a huge problem of public corruption in Turkey. And, it has actually become part of international politics vis-a-vis Turkey. As you know, last year there was a legislation draft in U.S. Congress that actually targeted, included sanctions and also required looking into the wealth of President Erdogan and his family members and his close associates. So, if you look at any indexes across the world, public corruption is a huge problem in Turkey. The public procurement law has been changed hundreds of times just to meet the needs of businessmen. And I don't want to call them businessmen because I think it's unfair. I want to call them cronies, AKP cronies, so that they can actually end up getting the tender. In Turkey, there are billions of dollars worth of projects offered, not only in a bidding process, but just imitation only. And that raises huge question marks. In terms of solving Turkey's financial problems, I think one of the reasons why AKP is shy about going to international financial institutions to ask for money is because they will have to open up the books and they will have to be more transparent about the public spending. They will have to be very cognizant of the fact that the public procurement law in Turkey doesn't fit any international standards. And it's one of the reasons why I think they're concerned about seeking international financial assistance. So I'm actually very happy with the recent work that was initiated by Mayor Yavaş and Mayor İmamoğlu. It shows to Turkish people that as a party that we are keeping our word in terms of transparency. And I just want to add a couple things about our chairman's speech. I actually thought it was the best speech he ever gave in his career as a chairman in the last 10 years. It was very powerful and emotional, but I also think it was very fair and it was very fact-based. So not a single person can come up and say he made any material mistake in his speech. I think it was very flawless, and I was very happy with the reaction that we got, not only from people who actually vote for CHP, but from people who actually vote for other parties. But they were very touched with the realities and with the questions that were brought up by our chairman, Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu.
Well, as a matter of fact, one of the headings from Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu's talk was his statement on the nationalization of pro-government companies' investments, which you also spoke about in terms of the tenders going to the AKP's cronies. Are there specific projects the party has in mind in line with this declaration? And how do you think both the business world and other parties within the People Alliance will react to such a decision? Because this week, Chairman of Deva Party, Ali Babacan, spoke to Medyascope and answered a question in this regard. And he suggested, he responded that each case should be investigated independently and that a wrong cannot be rectified with another wrong. So how does the CHP hope to garner the cooperation of other parties on this front?
I'm actually in full support of that move.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we've actually discussed in the past within the party, so it's not very new, but we've been bringing it up more. People should understand that this is not a move against businessmen. It's not a move against business world in Turkey. It's actually against AKP cronies who got overpaid for doing major public projects. And we all know that some of the pay that they got, it actually went to finance AKP as a party, or the media that they control. Everybody knows that. So I think our people, Turkish people, will be very cognizant of the fact that as a party and as an alliance, we are in favor of free market. We are in favor of competitive market. But we also have to remember that in the last 18 years, tens of billions of dollars worth of projects went to people who are close to the AKP government. And as I said, they got overpaid for the work that they did. We have never been against major public projects. We are against projects that pay 10 to 15 times more than what they actually have to pay. I mean, you look at, a lot of projects that actually will put Turkish people in deficit for decades to come. And that's a major problem. There are airports that have been built in smaller cities in Turkey, where they guaranteed, millions of passengers every year. And then you look at numbers from last year, it's only thousands of people who flew out of those airports. So it cannot be purely a misestimate. It cannot be a purely misbudgeting. It's actually a very planned way of robbery at the hands of public officials.
Yes, and that's why I think underlining this need for transparency is more important than ever, considering also the fact the economic woes Turkey is in at the moment, also due to the pandemic and so forth. Another aspect of Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu's talk, which also drew attention, it was his appeal actually to AKP MPs. Is this a change in strategy in the sense of trying to appeal to potential individuals who might be thinking of breaking away from the AKP?
I honestly, because I've known Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu for more than 10 years, and I worked very closely with him this past decade, and close to 9 years as his representative in Washington, D.C. As a person, that's just the way he is. All over his life, he's made strides to understand people who are different from him in terms of backgrounds, other beliefs or political views. So I think it's just because the way he made that very powerful speech, maybe it became more apparent, but he said it multiple times. And if you look at the town hall style meetings that he's been holding, especially during the pandemic, but also he had a lot of town hall style meetings in person, during the election time or during non-election time. He always tries to talk to people who are not the typical CHP voters. He always tries to understand non-CHP people. He always asks questions, trying to understand why do they not vote for us? What can we do to gain their trust? What can we do to have their backing so we can serve our country? And he, in our in-person conversations with him, he always gives credit to people who don't vote for CHP, saying that it's probably because we've not made enough efforts in the past, and we've not gone to them, we've not talked to them, we've not visited them. So people usually are concerned or are scared of things that they do not know. So a lot of people in Turkey actually didn't know CHP for a very long time. So I think the appeal that or the call that he made, not only to MPs within AKP, but also to voters in AKP, giving them reassurance that as CHP and as the People's Alliance, we'll be very fair, we'll not discriminate against anybody, but we also want to make sure that Turkey is ruled with rule and spirit of law.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as a matter of fact, it's very remarkable. CHP has indeed been trying to bring together the opposition against the AKP. And as we noticed from Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu's talk, there was also an appeal to people from within the AKP, to their conscious and, more in terms of an ethical way of doing politics. Yet Metropol's recent survey shows that the CHP is losing support even after the undecided votes are distributed. Why do you think that is?
So I think it may be a short-term effect with some of the discussions that may have happened regarding our party. But, at the end of the day, I honestly think that our party's success and our chairman's success is not depending on the results of CHP only. At the end of the day, there's a whole new alliance that includes multiple parties, the People's Alliance. And the founder, the architect, and the leader of that alliance is Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Everybody knows that. If it wasn't for Kılıçdaroğlu, EU Party, if it wasn't part of the alliance, they would not have been in parliament. They got only 9.9%. Maybe people will not have gotten to hear or learn more about, the Felicity Party, Temel Karamollaoğlu, even though they have only 1%, they've been under more public light because they are part of the alliance. Same as the Democratic Party, that has only one MP in parliament. So, we are truly believing in this as a collective effort. But at the end of the day, everybody has to recognize that under Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu's leadership, that we were able to win Istanbul, Ankara, Antalya, Adana, Mersin, at the local level. And as you know, in Turkish politics, municipalities are very, very important. At the local level, we are no longer in opposition. We actually rule Turkey. More than half of Turkish population now, they live under CHP-run municipalities. Close to 75% of Turkish economy is actually produced within CHP municipality-run cities and towns across Turkey. So, and it was actually really thanks to the leadership of Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu that we were able to put those candidates in place. I'll be frank, there was quite a bit of opposition to our candidates internally in Istanbul and in Ankara, in Antalya, and also some in Adana. But they were personally backed by our Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu, who actually knew the needs of the people in those cities. And, he went about in a very scientific, but also in a very personal way. And he backed those candidates, and thanks to his leadership that we were able to win those cities last year. So I think everybody should remember, the foundation of the success that we had with municipalities last year, but also, Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu, losing 1%, 2%. At the end of the day, there is more than 50% bloc in Turkey that actually, that look to Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu as a leader and as a guide. And I think that's what matters, given the Turkish politics today. When we move back to the parliamentarian system, that could be a whole new debate. But under the current system, alliance is what counts, and he's the leader and the architect of that alliance, so he should get that credit.
Yes, CHP has indeed been underlining a politics of alliance as opposed to bringing to the fore its own kind of independent identity. But there have also been, as you mentioned, internal oppositions. And as a result of that, there have been breakaways from the CHP. Both Mustafa Sarıgül and Muharrem İnce are planning on establishing their own parties. Muharrem İnce particularly is interesting since he was CHP's presidential candidate in 2018. Are you concerned that these new formations would lead to others leaving the party as well, or how will these new parties affect this politics of alliance?
I've been in politics for 10 years, and it is a very tough business. It is a very tough business, and people have goals. They have hopes, they have disappointments, and it is impossible to make everybody happy in the party, outside the party. So personally, I wouldn't want anybody to leave. But if they really want to leave and if they want to establish a new party, a new movement, it's their choice. I don't want to go and start guessing as to what their true incentives or motives may be. I don't want to get into that speculation. But I think at the end of the day, the true judge of that will be the Turkish people and will be the electorate. And people could criticize CHP for a lot of things. But I think a lot of people know that our intentions are good, and we've been putting a lot of efforts into erasing the stereotypes that have been brought about CHP in the last decades. People should remember that by the time Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu became the leader of our party, AKP had been in power for 8 years already. So, he wasn't the leader before. And by the time he became a chairman and he inherited the current political climate in Turkey, AKP had already grown very, very powerful. I mean, you look at the elections in 2002 and then in 2007, AKP had made huge strides. They were able to break up other center-right parties that may have come out as rivals to AKP. So our chairman, he became the chairman in May 2010. By then in Turkey, we had civil coups that actually included Ergenekon and Balyoz Sledgehammer, and we all know why those happened. At the hands of the Gülenist and AKP partnership, they dismantled opposition, they dismantled free media in Turkey, they cracked down on a lot of people who didn't give in. Thousands of people went to jail for years not knowing, just because of their stance against the Gülenist FETÖ group and as well as AKP. So nobody could just come out and say, CHP under Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu had come to a clean sheet and they had an easy start. It wasn't the case. By the time Chairman Kılıçdaroğlu was in seat, AKP was already at its probably peak in terms of the political stance in Turkey. And he became a chairman, and then a few months later we had a referendum in Turkey, September 12, 2010. 5 months after he became chairman, and that paved the way for AKP and the Gülenists to really dismantle Turkish judiciary. And they changed the legislation in a way that actually gave Erdogan a free card to probably do anything he wants. So I think if we remember those details, people will be more understanding and they'll be more aware of the fact that how a difficult heritage we had in terms of a political heritage to start with. So those are the comments that I want to make sure that people hear and they remember. But flashback from 2010 to 2019 to last year, the political landscape changed. So now what makes me really happy about the elections from last year is the fact that in the past we used to speak to manifestos and the party platforms and agendas, but after starting with the major municipalities and after winning them last year, now we have the chance to show people in person the services that we can do, the things that we can offer under CHP municipalities. I think the pandemic gave us a very chaotic environment, but also a chance for us to show what CHP municipalities can do for people. And, in life, it's always much easier to show things in person than explaining them through manifestos. So I think that's going to pave the way for us to success in the next elections.
Mm-hmm. And yes, thank you for summarizing that. Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu on yesterday spoke to Medyascope's editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır, and he also highlighted the importance of an independent judiciary and the state of the law, and that when a country doesn't have one, that no one has life or property safety in that regards. Right. Mr. Özcan, I know you're pressed for time, but you are the CHP representative to the United States, and I'd also like to ask some questions in that regard. Can you first of all tell us what CHP's expectations are of the Biden administration?
Look, we do not have any specific expectations from them. And I want to emphasize that we don't have any expectations from anybody outside Turkey. We actually want all the countries to mind their own business and do not interfere with anybody else's domestic politics. I have to say that AKP has looked to outside countries multiple times, on multiple occasions, and got support from them, both from Washington and Brussels, and also some other European countries when they needed to. But as CHP, we don't look for that. When it comes to Turkish-American relations, though, we want both countries to be aware of all the decades that went into Turkish-American relations, Turkish-American friendship. And we want both parties to be careful and also respectful of each other. And diplomacy takes years to build. Those alliances they take years to build. But with very specific mistakes, they can go down the drain. So I think Turkish-American relations are going into a very, very fragile period. We after the EU meeting. There has been some news that the U.S. may hit Turkey with sanctions. So we want, the Turkish government and the U.S. government to keep the dialogue and to solve the problems, because Turkey has been a long member of NATO alliance. We have, the second largest military in NATO after the U.S. We have been aspiring for a very long time to become part of the European Union. So those relationships and those efforts, have been taken for decades. So we want to make sure that they don't fall victim into domestic politics or populist approaches that actually President Erdogan or AKP resort to multiple times when they needed, internal boost.
Support, yeah. There's a new ambassador, as a matter of fact, who was appointed to Washington, Murat Mercan, who's also a founding member of the AKP, and he will be Turkey's new envoy to the United States. Do you believe Mr. Mercan can fix the relations between Turkey and US in that regard and reintroduce diplomacy into the dynamic?
No. I honestly think he was a terrible choice. Okay. And I'm not saying this because he's not a career diplomat. Mm-hmm. I'm actually in favor of political appointees. It's a method that's commonly used in the West, in Europe, in the US, as long as they are qualified people who know well the countries that they're appointed to, and but that's not the case currently. And I honestly think that it was more of a loyalty to President Erdogan than as somebody who will do a good job there. Not only will he not improve the relations between the two countries, I think he may become another liability in this relationship. Because as you know, he was he actually admitted that he was, going to be on the Mavi Marmara ship, and he got out at the last minute. He's put out many statements in the past that I think wouldn't serve him well in that capacity. So, and I just don't think he's a qualified person. And as a Turkish citizen who's been living in the US for 20 years, I'm actually concerned that his appointment may make matters worse.
Yes, Yurter Özcan, thank you so much for having joined us this evening.
Thank you for your invite.
Turkish security forces detained a total of 304 suspects on Tuesday in operations across the country against the Gülenist terror group FETÖ.
Prosecutors in Izmir had issued warrants on Tuesday for 304 suspects, including 295 active duty personnel of the Turkish armed forces. The suspects are accused of communicating by payphone with covert imams who are senior FETÖ members. Of the detained suspects, 193 were on active duty in the Turkish Land Forces Command and 111 of them in the Air Forces Command. There are 5 colonels, 1 lieutenant colonel, 10 captains, 53 lieutenants, 5 second lieutenants, 221 sergeants, 7 specialized surgeons, and 1 employee of the Turkish Air Forces Command who is accused of being the covert imam responsible for the soldiers. This was one of the largest operations of its kind against the group's military infiltration scheme. Other operations on Tuesday targeted FETÖ's infiltrators in the healthcare sector. In the capital Ankara, prosecutors ordered arrests of 10 suspects, including 3 doctors still on active duty, in a probe against the group's infiltration into the health ministry. Moreover, prosecutors ordered arrests of 37 suspects in a probe into the group's scheme to infiltrate into a military hospital. Nearly 21 suspects have been captured so far. Suspects were serving at Gülhane Military Medicine Academy, GATA, whose name was changed to the University of Health Sciences after the 2016 coup attempt.
As a result of the EU leaders' summit in Brussels, which took place over the last 2 days, the leaders have agreed on limited sanctions against Turkey, targeting individuals and companies in response to Turkey's gas explorations in waters off the coast of Greece and Cyprus.
EU leaders gathered in Brussels on Thursday for 2 days of discussions on the EU budget and COVID-19, as well as transatlantic ties and relations in Turkey. The Union shared the relevant part of the final declaration on Turkey as they reached a consensus after long hours of negotiations. The declaration states that Turkey engaged in unilateral actions and provocations and escalated its rhetoric against the EU. The decision paves the way for penalizing individuals and companies involved in planning and carrying out the gas exploration, with travel bans into the EU and asset freezes. The EU noted Turkey's withdrawal of the Oruç research vessel and insisted on sustained de-escalation to follow for the early resumption and smooth continuation of direct exploratory talks between Greece and Turkey. Moreover, the declaration condemned the partial opening of the city of Varosha and argues that UN Security Council resolutions should be respected. EU leaders left the door open for stricter measures to be taken at the next EU Leaders Summit in March 2021.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.